There are so many great mechanics that see very little play in Magic the Gathering, either because they're just bad, or people don't know they exist because it's very old and they haven't had any recent reprints. Today, I'm talking about one of my favorite unpopular mechanics in MTG. And by unpopular, I mean the top played card with this mechanic sees play in less than 9,000 decks, and the second highest is in 3,396 decks. The mechanic I'm talking about today is Clash, which was first introduced in the Lorwyn block and was revisited in Morningtide. The most recent printing was in the Murders at Karlov Manor commander decks with Marvo Deep Operative, who actually was the card that introduced me to how fun this mechanic actually is. And in case you're curious, Marvo is the card played in almost 9,000 total decks. So any other card with Clash that wasn't printed in the last year sees play in less than 3,500 decks. So very unpopular. If you're not familiar with the mechanic, Clash says each clashing player reveals the top card of his or her library, then puts that card on top or bottom. A player wins if his or her card had a higher converted mana cost. So there's a few things that I love about this mechanic. One, it's interactive in a fun way. When you clash, people usually, volunteer. They raise their hands to clash because it is fun and it's harmless. In fact, it benefits the opponent who has chosen to clash with you. So, in a meta full of oppressive cards and abilities, it's refreshing to play against a mechanic that gets the whole table interested to see who wins. I'm a Magic player who loves cracking booster packs, so even without any top deck manipulation, I'm always in for a little anticipation to see if I win or not. Number two, even if you lose the Clash, you benefit from a pseudo scry ability. Clash says you can reveal the card and put it on the top or bottom of your library. Yeah, there is the aspect of keeping the card and people know what is in your hand now, but there's also many cases where you need a land or a non-land card, and the Clash helps you get rid of what would have been a dead draw for you. So that's one benefit, is even if you lose, you can put the card that you revealed on the bottom of your library if you don't want it. But for number three, the ability is usually improved greatly if you win the Clash. So in the case of Marvo, you get to draw a card for winning, then cast a spell from your hand with mana value 8 or less for free. I mean, talk about what a prize for winning. The ability itself is pretty straightforward, and those are kind of the main reasons why I really enjoy playing it. So with that being said, here are some of my favorite Clash cards and how many decks they are played in. The first one is Pollen Lullaby, which is insanely slept on if you ask me, as a fog spell that sees play in only 1,024 decks and only costs 17 cents. First of all, 2 mana in white is a pretty good rate for a fog ability. Not to mention you get that pseudo scry that I talked about. So this card says, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Clash with an opponent. If you win, creatures that player controls don't untap during that player's next untap step. So not only can fog spells completely mess up an opponent's entire game plan who tapped out for the win, this makes them tapped out for 2 turns and can absolutely ruin their day. The opponent doesn't even have to have attacked. This is an instant spell. Maybe they have some nasty activated tap abilities that you don't want them activating on your turn. Or they have a bunch of mana dorks and you want to make sure that you have a good draw for next turn. So you clash, you keep it, or just put it at the bottom. And so this is a highly slept on, underrated card that I'm a really big fan of. Next up is Spring Cleaning, which is a 23-cent common that is played in 1,332 decks. This is a 2-minute instant that says, destroy target enchantment, clash with an opponent. If you win, destroy all enchantments your opponents control. So, at worst, this is a 2-mana instant that removes an enchantment and lets you decide to keep your next card draw on the top or bottom of your library. And best case, it's a one-sided enchantment sweep for 2 mana. Yeah, I know. Like, Nature's Claim is also an instant that costs one less and can target an artifact or enchantment, but there's an argument that there's always a better version of an unpopular card that can be played. I personally love this card because it's fun. It leads to a variety in the games that you play. The table interaction and suspense keeps you interested in what will happen, and when you're rewarded, it's that much more satisfying. And if not, you still removed a problem enchantment for 2 mana. If you're one of the 1,300 people who have used this spring cleaning card, let me know what you think about it, because I'd love to hear your opinion. A third Clash card that I love is Captivating Glance. This is a 23-cent uncommon that is played in 3031 decks. This is a 3 mana aura enchantment that says, enchant creature. At the end of your turn, clash with an opponent. If you win, gain control of enchanted creature. Otherwise, that player gains control of enchanted creature. So there's a few things to know as per the rules of this card. The opponent you clash with doesn't have to be, and in most cases will not be, the owner of the creature that you enchant. This means that it can be used as like a pseudo removal that doubles up as a politic card. If there's a huge threat on the board, you can partner with someone on the board and make a deal that if they gain control of the creature, that they won't attack you. Or you could also use this on the arch enemy's commander, so the person will have to use a removal spell on their own commander to get it back. So even if you don't gain control of the creature, you partnered up with someone and removed a threat from the person who needed the creature the most. And the last rule to know is that if Captivating Glance is destroyed, the person who gained control of the creature still gets to keep it. So, as with most Clash cards that I share today, I'm happy with the worst case scenario, and I'm even happier if I win the Clash, but that's kind of the fun part, is if I'm not satisfied with the base minimum that I can get if I lose, then I'm not going to play it. But the upside is big enough that I'm going to be playing these cards. A fourth Clash card that I like is Whirlpool Whelm. This is a 12-cent common that is played in 2,930 decks. So, this is a 2 mana instant that says, clash with an opponent, then return target creature to its owner's hand. If you win, you may put that creature on top of its owner's library instead. I've mentioned this in other videos, but I really enjoy unsummon effects because they're almost always a mana positive investment for me. You can save it in your hand to use only when a threat is attacking you, and the threats that merit this are usually more expensive than the unsummoned card itself. So the player will need to pay, let's say, another 5 or 6 mana to get the creature back and use up their resources to get back to the same board state as they were before, rather than advancing their position. So if I say that I like unsummon effects, I absolutely love when it puts it at the top of their library instead. And this is for the exact same reasons as before. They're not advancing their board state, they have to spend mana to get back to ground zero, but with the added benefit of removing their next card draw. Not only, do they have to spend all this mana, it's just a huge benefit that that their next card or their next upkeep, what they're drawing. So I am personally willing to pay the extra mana for a pseudo scry and a chance to put a threat on the top of a library. In the right decks, this is even greater than a 50% chance. If you play with a lot of high mana cards, or an opponent is playing very low mana cards because they're low to the ground aggro, or they just run a lot of extra lands for a landfall deck. I'll be adding these unpopular cards to the crowdsource spreadsheet in the Discord, and if you are interested in unpopular cards, deck lists, and conversations like these, check out the Patreon where we have conversations about underrated cards not recommended on EDH Rec every single day. So these 4 cards that I shared are my personal favorites, obviously in addition to Marvo Deep Operative that I mentioned earlier, but I'll share a few more cards without going into too much detail to shed some light on a few more unpopular cards that you could use if you're interested in this mechanic. Order's Greed is a 4 mana sorcery that makes you lose 2 life and draw 2 cards. If you win the clash, then you repeat the process. So you take the gamble to draw either 2 for 4 mana or 4 cards for 4 mana. Revive the Fallen is a 2 mana sorcery that returns a creature in a graveyard to its owner's hand. And if you win the clash, then you return Revive the Fallen to your hand to just do it again. Woodland Guidance returns a card in your graveyard to your hand, and if you win the clash, you untap all your forests. This one is a little more risk than I'd like to take personally, but I'm sharing it in case this is right up your alley or a deck comes to mind immediately when you read this. Another card is Guiltleaf Ambush, which is a 3 mana instant that puts 2 elves on the battlefield. If you win, they gain Death Touch, so you can kill 2 unsuspecting attackers, or you can just use this to if you want some ETBs not on your turn, like in a Galadriel deck, or for something like Gala Greeters. The last card that I'll mention is Research the Deep, which is a 2 mana sorcery that is the most played Clash card outside of Marvo. So this card says, draw a card, clash with an opponent. If you win, return Research the Deep to its owner's hand. So it's pretty straightforward. It's a cantrip that lets you check the top of your library and clash, and if you win, then you get the cantrip back. But, that's all that I have for you today. Let me know if you enjoyed this highlight of an unpopular mechanic, because I do have a few more in mind if you'd like to see them in the future. If you haven't played these cards, give it a shot, because it's a great way to have just a lot of fun in your games and add more interaction with the play group. Is there an underrated or less well-known mechanic that you like? I'd love to hear in the comments below, because I might cover that in a future video as well, just like this. So thanks everyone for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.